Hi there, welcome to the video. Today we'll be discussing and analysing Azog's Hunters, the faction from the Middle-earth strategy battle game. Now this is an army I've been experimenting with and playing pretty much non-stop for the last few months now. And there's a lot to know with this army, a few things that will surprise you that you wouldn't have expected just reading the rules purely from the book. And we're going to go through everything in this video, and hopefully it can help you with building your army and in your games. So what we're going to discuss in this video is, first of all, we'll go through each individual army component and the ratings for each of the different units. This is going to be a number of different characteristics that I will score all units against. We'll then be looking at the strengths and weaknesses of the army in general, and why that is a strength and why it's a weakness, and what you can do to combat those or maximize the strengths. There is also then allies and alternatives that we'll be discussing. So these are the allies from other factions that you can put into an army list with Azog's Hunters, and alternatives are potential other armies that are very similar, such as Legendary Legions. Following that, we'll then be moving on to competitive play. So this will be looking into the actual tactics within the game itself and how you can maximize and play optimally with this army. There is a number of different styles you can adopt when running Azog's Hunters. So we'll then be looking into the different ways you can build this army for different play styles. And then we'll move on to actually physically building the army and actual lists, putting them together. Before then, I show you a few example lists. 4 in total it will be, 2 of 500, 2 of 700, as these are the most common tournament points. And then last of all, we'll be looking at the final army rating. So I'll be judging the army based on all the most common things you're going to face in this game and how well this army does against each of those things. We'll also then be discussing what you can do to try and get around potential weaknesses as well. So let's start off with moving on to the army itself and the individual units within it. So first of all, we have Azog, of course. He is the leader. He is a big hitting hero. So Azog is 165 points base. He is a Gundabad Orc infantry, however he can be mounted, and he is a hero of legend. Now he moves 6 inches. He has a fight value of 7, strength 5, defense 5, 3 attacks, 3 wounds, courage 5, might 3, will 3, and fate 1. Now he initially just comes with a sword and a mace as standard. However, he can also take the White Warg for an additional 50 points. You always want to be doing this, no matter what. Under no circumstances do you ever want to not take the White Warg. We'll discuss that a little further in a moment. He also comes with Heroic March, Strike, Strength, and Challenge, and special rules. So he's burly, first of all, so he will not get the -1 if you chose to two-hand. However, he doesn't actually have a two-handed weapon in this army because he can't take the stone flail that he gets in Azog's Legion faction. His General of the North special rule means that he has a 12-inch standfast instead of just the normal 6-inch standfast. And additionally, it can affect other Orc heroes. So if you've got the other Orcs heroes around him, they will automatically pass as well. They don't need to take a separate courage test, which is excellent considering some of them don't have particularly good courage. And the final special rule, the best special rule for Azog, is I am the Master, which means that when rolling to wound an enemy hero model after winning a fight, Azog never needs to roll more than a 3+ to score a wound against them, regardless of their defense. Now, the only one that can counter this is if they call a heroic defense, in which case you are still wounding on a 6. But in all of the scenarios, he will wound all heroes regardless of their defense on a 3+. So he is an incredible hero killer, even beyond Aragorn with Anduril at 4+. 3+ wounding. That's why I've rated him initially at hero killing as a 10 out of 10. There cannot be really any other comparable hero killing hero in this game in terms of pure wounding potential. You can have monsters, you can have heavy hitters with high fights that are more likely to win the fight potentially than Azog. However, he does have strike, so he can go up to 10. He's got plenty of might as well. But 10 for hero killing for Azog. Now, I mentioned the White Warg before. Now, if you add the White Warg into Azog's profile, you are gaining an additional 3 points of might, 1 will, and 1 fate. If they do get separated, the White Warg acts as its own independent hero. It will automatically pass all courage tests as part of the Raging Beast Deadly Union 2 special rules, which state that while they're together, they can use each other's might, will, and fate. Excellent. So essentially, you've got an Azog with a 6 might, 4 will, 2 fate. And if they do get separated, the White Warg automatically passes its courage test to stay and fight, and additionally passes all courage tests for the remainder of the battle. And that's regardless of whether Azog's alive or not. So even if Azog gets killed, you've still got a White Warg that will refuse to run away. And even separated, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, strength 5, defense 5, fight 5, it can still do decent amount of damage. Another key reason to always take the White Warg if you are taking Azog is it causes terror. So that means Azog causes terror, of course, while they are together. And you gain the Fell Sight special rule, so you can charge enemies that you do not have line of sight to. However, they could not charge you, which can lead to a few sneaky plays. So if we discuss the rest of the characteristics for the 2 of them, hero killing 10, as I've said, 3+ wounding on heroes makes Azog incredible. Additionally, it means that you get a good trade. They will likely win a fight and wound you on 5s, sometimes 4s if they are particularly strong, but normally it'll be 5s they'll be wounding Azog on. Whereas if he wins the fight, he wounds them on 3s, so the trade-off of you charging a hero, there's a lot more chance that you're going to do a lot of damage to them than they are going to do a lot of damage to you. Which means that it's a decent gamble in your favour. You'd be unlucky and unlikely to lose most one-on-one hero engagements. In terms of troop killing, Azog is very good at troop killing. Of course, once he's mounted, he'll get double strikes once he wins the fight. He's got high fight of 7. No normal troop is going to beat him there. You don't need to mess around striking or doing any roll-offs. However, his strength 5 against normal troops, if they are defense 6 or higher, he's wounding them on 5s. And if they've charged you, you've only got 3 attacks. He can fluff those rolls. If he's got the charge, you're still okay. He can regularly take out 2 guys a turn. You'd be unfortunate if he doesn't. And if you think it's worth it, you can also use his might. Personally, with Azog, I'd like to use his might for the duels and the wounding on heroes. If you do fluff the 3+ and you really want to just get one off the board and it just needs 1 more wound, you shouldn't have to use strike very often with Azog, seeing as though he has the majority of times the superior fight value. However, if you do, he's got 6 might. It's worth keeping 1 around. Assess your opponent's heroes at the beginning of the game. If they've got somebody that is going to be reliably able to strike higher than a 7 fight, or they have got something like an Elendil or a Gilgalad or something, then you might want to keep a few spare and don't be quite so aggressive with your might points, because you will likely need them for that engagement. So going back to his characteristics there, so 8 for troop killing. I think he is very, very good at this. However, he's not quite perfect at it. He can fluff these, and he's not as consistent as someone else we're going to discuss in a moment. In terms of monsters, now Azog, if he's up against a normal monster, strength 5 is still decent, and most monsters are defense 7, 8, so he will wound them on 5s or 6s. You've got might to help that, but if they win the fight against you, they will wound you quite easily. So it's a little risky. So against a normal monster, not a hero monster, just a normal monster, you maybe want to avoid getting him into them, unless you are willing to burn some might to make sure you win the fight and make sure you do some wounds. Or if he's got backup, if he has plenty of troops around him that can also assist and you're rolling a lot of dice to wound, great, go for it. Or trap the monster. Either of these two scenarios, Azog is a good character to get in there, especially with his fight being so high. He will outduel quite a few monsters, he'll tie with others. It's excellent. Now, the reason I've given him a 6 is also he could be brilliant against monsters if they are hero monsters. However, I'm going to classify that as hero killing. But just to briefly discuss it separately, hero monsters will be wounded by Azog on a 3+. So he can flash kill monsters that usually would have a lot of staying power and a lot of units would struggle to wound. Azog can annihilate them, especially if he gets the charge. He's got the extra attack. He's got some support around him as well. You could even team him up with other heroes within this list who can also damage quite easily, and you can really flash kill some big creatures and get them off the battlefield. So bear that in mind. If you're against a hero monster, that's actually better for Azog than if you're up against just a normal monster. So moving on to survivability, I've given him a 7 because he's got a decent defense of 5. The White Warg's defense 5. Between them, they've got 5 wounds. You've got 2 fate. You've got a lot of might as well to avoid yourself getting in bad situations with heroic moves. And then even if you come up against magic, you've got a nice 4 will at least to try and contain the effect that magic has on you. Also has a high courage, so courage 5 is pretty decent. He should be sticking around. You've got the will as well. If there isn't magic on the field, you've not had to use it for that to make sure that he's passing those courage tests. As a hero of legend, he'll pass the first time your army breaks. Yes, he should stick around for the majority of the fight. He is hard to take out. You do want to cover him from shooting on your way into combat, so maybe a couple of fell wargs, hunter orcs just in front of him to provide him the ways to reduce the amount of shots that are going into him, and especially the warg, you want to keep them mounted together if you can. In terms of price, I've given him a 7 because even though the two of them together cost 215 points, which is massive, he's worth it. The damage output and what he provides to your army and the control he has, and just how terrifying he is to the opponent to try and deal with. He fully justifies the points cost. I was even considering putting it as an 8 because you are paying a lot, but you can rely on him every battle to stay out the course, cause a lot of carnage to the opposition, and really carry battles for you by himself. So I think the price is fair. His special rules, I've touched on them already in a reasonable amount of detail. They are excellent, especially the 3+ wounding on heroes. It's a pity that in this army he can't have a 2-handed weapon because it kind of wastes the burly rule that he has, which is a bit disappointing. But his special rules are excellent. And then Might, Will, Fate, to rate those, I've given them a 9. The only reason it's not a 10 is purely because there is only 2 Fate between them. And with the lower defense, he can get wounded, and with only 2 fate, it's not perfect. However, he is an incredible hero, extremely fun to use, and you see the fear in your enemy's eyes when he's on the field. And for that reason, I'm giving him an 8.8. rating. And now let's move on to his son and counterpart, Bolg. So Bolg is 165 points, just like Azog base. However, he doesn't start with as strong a profile, as we'll discuss. So he is a Gundabad Orc infantry hero. He is now a hero of Valor, so he can lead 15 troops for you, in opposed to Azog's 18 in his warband. He will move 6 inch by himself, fight 7, strength 5, defense 7, 3 attacks, 3 wounds, courage 5, 3 might, 3 will, 1 fate. He also can take a bow, in which case he'd hit on a 5. With this army bonus, he would go to a 4. The army bonus for Azog's Hunters, I just realised I haven't actually mentioned it at the start, is they get an improvement of +1 to their shoot value, so he would be a 4+, and also you can take 50% bows with this army. Anyway, back to Bolg. So the war gear he comes with as standard is the heavy armour that is stapled into him, and then the two-handed pick, which is excellent because just like Azog, you can see on the side there he has the Burly special rule, so he can actually two-hand with Burly and make the most of it. He has optionals, Felwag for 10 points and Orc Bow for 5 points. The Felwag is just a normal wag. There's no extra stats with it. He can be dismounted a lot easier than Azog, so you do want to be careful of that and keep it safe. I would always recommend mounting him, because if you can get him into combat still mounted, which most of the time you can, it really significantly increases his damage output. The wag itself has a particularly interesting base, as you might be able to see on the photo. It's quite long and thin, meaning you can engage 3 or 4 models with the base, in opposed to Azog's slightly larger than a cavalry base circle. Bolg has this oval shape, which does mean he can sneak through smaller gaps. It also means that he can engage more troops, and I think it's brilliant, the base. It really adds a different dimension to how you use him. It's quite fun to try and figure out the best way of maximising the base and where it's going to touch. He comes with heroic actions of March, Strike, Strength and Challenge. He has Ancient Enemies special rules for Dwarves and Elves, so he will re-roll rolls of a 1 when he's attempting to wound them. He has Burly, as I said, so he can use his two-handed pick two-handed. And also he could look to Piercing Strike, so he could improve his strength up to a 6. So even defense 8, he would be wounding on 4s with the Burly two-handing, which is incredible. So nobody is safe from being wounded by Bolg. He comes with a special rule called Bringer of Death. It's a fun little mini game you get to do during the battle. So every time he slays a model, you need to take a note of it. I use a dice, or 2 dice it becomes, to count his kills throughout. Once he's slain 2 or more enemies, he then causes terror. Once he's killed 5 or more enemies, he gains the Harbinger of Evil special rule. So it's a -1 courage to all enemy models within 12 inches. And then last of all, if you get him up to 10 kills or more, he gains the Mighty Hero special rule. So he will get a free point of might every turn. Now that does require you to get 10 kills. And he is brilliant at killing troops, because there's not many troops that are defense 8. Most are lower than that, meaning he can regularly be wounding normal troops on 3s and 4s. You charge him in with his wag, knocks them down, he'll get 8 strikes at them. He can easily kill 2 to 3 models a turn, if you focus on getting him on troops at first. So you've got to play him a certain way, Bolg. He's only got limited 3 might until you get to the Mighty Hero. So when you first get him into combat, you want to be getting him into optimal fights against purely troops. Once you get into Harbinger of Evil, 5 kills, he is more of a threat to Heroes, they might not be able to charge him. They're getting the -1 courage. He can then charge them, knock them down if they're not mounted, and he can slay them quite easily as well. But it's still a little risky with him. He has got strike, which is excellent, but really you want to be focusing on killing troops, killing troops, killing troops. Keep the heroes tied up if you can, and then only focus on them once you've got Bolg to his optimal form. Because of how high his strength is and his two-handing, even though he doesn't have Azog's special rule of wounding heroes on a 3+, even the ones with extremely high defences, Bolg will usually be wounding them on 4s, which isn't much of a drop-off. So I've given him a 9 for hero killing and a 10 for troop killing. I think Azog, when you charge him in, he is one of the best troop killers in the entire game. He can also use his incredible strength and two-handing and piercing strike for monster mashing. So I've given him an 8. The only reason I've given him an 8 is because he only has limited might. You can only strike up 3 times if you're up against a fight 8 or higher monster. That can be you're racing against the clock to win those fights and get the wounds. And if you lose a fight, you lose a roll-off on the strike, for instance, you can lose your Warg very, very easily. They will probably wound the Warg on 3s, and then he's not mounted anymore, and it does reduce what you can do with Bolg. He's still very good, but with only 1 fate, 3 wounds, you're risking it a little if you do lose the fight against a monster. So choose your timing wisely. Try and support him with backup to make sure you win the fight, and you can try and slay it in 1 turn. He will likely wound if he wins, but you've just got to be careful of timing that well. In terms of survivability, I've given him a 7. He's got incredibly high defense 7, which is brilliant. It does make him more resilient to shooting, but you've just got to keep his Warg safe while he is still mounted. Definitely get a few guys in the way on your way into combat to make sure that it isn't getting shot off him. Be aware of magic. They can easily do a panic steed or a black dart or something like that at your Warg and get rid of it. Maybe stay outside of their range of magic to do that and focus on killing troops and getting them to at least Mighty Hero or Harbinger of Evil or something before you go anywhere near that caster where you might lose your mount. Try and charge the casters if you can with any troops to stop them targeting Bolg and his Warg. In terms of price, fully kitted out, or even if you just want to take him with Felwarg, it's 175 or 180 points. It's fantastic price for what he does. He's a big piece. He can reliably do a lot of damage, a lot of work for you. I love using him and Azog, and I think they are priced exactly what they should be. They are expensive, as they should be, but they justify it by being very effective on the battlefield. Special rules, I've given him an 8. It's very fun doing the Bringer of Death and counting his kills. The Burly makes him a lot better than he would be otherwise at killing power, which is brilliant. The ancient enemies on dwarves and elves, you come up against them a reasonable amount of time, so it's good to make sure you're getting to re-roll those fluffed rolls of a 1. And then the special rule I think I forgot to mention earlier is the Morgul Arrows. It's a special rule that he gets for the whole army, regardless of whether you take him with the Orc Bow or not. I'd recommend you don't take him with the bow. Ideally, you want him in combat and moving fast. You don't really need the bow. But the Morgul Arrows means that if any of your other bowmen in your army wound any multi-wound model, they are essentially poisoned with the Morgul Arrow. And every turn they have to roll a dice at the beginning of the turn, and if they roll a 1, they automatically take another wound. And there's no way to stop this. And if they can roll particularly bad, you can deal just 1 wound with your arrow and then watch big wound models slowly die over time. It's not that effective, if I'm honest, but it's a nice little quirk, and if your opponent rolls bad, you can see some benefit to it. But his other special rules are great. Might, Will and Fate, I've given him a 6. Reason being is just because of the Fate being only 1. It does mean that again, you've got to be slightly careful with him. Don't get him trapped and overwhelmed. Don't be too reckless charging him in by himself. Make sure he is supported and you've got some men with him as well. But overall, Bolg is an excellent hero. Final rating I've given him is an 8.4. Now moving on to your next hero is Yazneg. He is an Orc infantry hero, a hero of fortitude. Move 6 initially without being mounted, where he would go up to 10 inch. Fight 4, strength 4, defense 5, attacks 2, wounds 2, courage 3, with 3 might, 1 will, 1 fate. Now, he comes a standard with armour and a 2-handed axe, and options for him is a Felwarg for 10 points and a Lance for 5 points. You always want to take him with both of those options. The Warg improves his movement and his raw killing power, and the Lance just enhances that further by giving you the +1 to wound when you've charged. Heroic actions, he does have Strike, which can come in handy if he goes up against other heroes. If you want to hunt on-foot captains, you can get him to a higher fight than they are, and let the Lance and the knockdown and the extra attack do the damage. Special rules, he has Expert Rider and the Price of Failure. Now, what the Price of Failure does is, if your army contains both Azog and Yazneg, and the two of them are in base contact at the beginning of your move phase, instead of rolling the dice to make a courage test when your force is broken, you can remove Yazneg from play as a casualty. If you do this, Azog is considered to have automatically passed his test, and his standfast will affect the entire battlefield for that turn. And furthermore, because Yazneg's been removed, whilst Azog is still alive, all Hunter Orcs, Orc Captains, and Fimble and Narzug will re-roll all failed courage tests. So that isn't just courage tests to keep them from running breaking point. It's also to charge terror models, things like that. So if it's getting towards the end of the battle and you've only got you've got troops left, you're facing terror, everyone's struggling to charge, you can actually just do this, remove him, keep Azog, passing all his courage tests, and everyone else will be re-rolling. Can be useful, but it is very situational. So, assessing Yazneg in terms of hero killing, if he's up against smaller heroes, such as captains, I'd say he can be pretty good at that. He might have lower fight value than some of them, but he has strike, and they won't have strike. Against some of the mid-level named heroes, it's probably going to be a bit of an even fair fight, where I wouldn't recommend you really put him in those fights unless they're in a precarious situation. You can trap them or get the charge, knock them down. And he's not going to be very effective against some of the bigger heroes. He's got killing power if he wins, so you could team him up with Bolg and Azog to take on bigger things, like I mentioned before, and he will assist them with getting more wounds. But yeah, he has to be backed up for that sort of thing. In terms of troop killing, though, this is where he excels over some of the other and smaller named heroes in this list. He is only fight 4, so he can unfortunately draw with quite a lot of normal troops. However, if he wins the fight, knocking them down if he's charged, the Lance with the +1 to wound, he can be pretty reliable at taking out 1 or 2 troops for you each turn. He can also sometimes be very useful with a heroic combat when you really need to get him in to peel something off to help one of your other heroes, or to just add in the extra weight of attacks to help them out. And you can usually rely on him to at least kill 1 troop or 2 if he's up against them, use his might. My biggest use for Yazneg really is you have him running near Azog or Bolg, or both of them, and he can be on might caddy, so you don't want to be using their might for heroic moves. You can keep Yazneg near them, he can move just as quick as them, and you can use him for the heroic moves to keep them going into the engagements they want and keep everyone charging. You have got to be careful with him because of his low courage. He is only courage 3, which reflects him running away when he was ambushed by Elrond in the books. Yeah, you can improve that with a Warhorn in the army, and that's generally when I'd take Yazneg. Take Yazneg if you've got a Warhorn in your army so he can reliably charge, because if you come up against terror armies, it is a bit annoying when you've got a 60-point hero, you really want to charge with the Lance and the Warg, and he keeps failing courage tests, and he only has 1 will. So, yeah, take him in armies where you've got your Warhorn. If you haven't, there is an alternative that we'll get onto in a moment. In terms of taking on monsters, he can do wounds to monsters if he wins, but he's unlikely to win by himself, so he needs to just be used as a support with some of your bigger guys, hence why I've given him a lower rating of a 4. Survivability is a 5. He does have a decent defense of 5. Most things will be wounding him on 5s or higher. Well, not really higher, but usually 5s, sometimes 4s. He does have a fate point. You have to protect the Warg on the way in again, similar to with Bolg. You want to keep a few troops to provide in the ways against archer fire, and be careful of magic getting him off the Warg as well. In terms of price, though, I've given him a 7 because for just 60 points, you're getting a very good, reliable damage dealer. You're getting 3 might, and you're getting a good hero to synergize with your bigger guys as well, and strike if you need it. In terms of special rules, I've given it a 5. I think it's pretty average. It's very situational. You're not going to use it most of the time. And then Might Will Fate, I've given him a 7 because it's pretty standard, but it's above average because you do have the 3 might because he's a named hero. And I'm giving Yazneg a 6.6 rating. He's very useful to the army. I love using him. I think the model looks beautiful as well. You've just got to be aware of his limitations and use him where you should, which is backing up your big heroes with might and killing troops around them to thin your opponent's numbers. Now moving on to Azog. Azog is an Orc infantry hero of Fortitude, movement 6, fight 4, strength 4, defense 5, attacks 2, wounds 2, courage 4, 3 might, 1 will, 1 fate. As standard, the war gear that he comes with is armour, a sword, and an orc bow. So that is an 18-inch strength 2 orc bow. And optionally, you can put him on a Felwarg. However, the model for this doesn't actually exist, so you need to do a conversion. Comes with heroic accuracy as the heroic action, and special rules are the expert rider and Morgul arrows that we've already discussed, and then lethal aim. Now, lethal aim is each turn, Azog may spend a single point of might without reducing his own store. Even if he doesn't have any remaining, you can still do this. And you can use this to modify a to hit roll, an in the way roll, or a to wound roll when shooting. So essentially what this means is Azog with the army bonus will be hitting on 3s. So you're going to be hitting 66% of the time. If you have an in the way, then it's a 50-50 chance of that, but you only need a 2 really. You only need a 3 to get through the in the way, because you could use this free point to move it up to a 4. So that means, again, 66% of the time, you will pass your in the way. And then if you've not had to use your might on either of those 2 things, when it comes to wounding, you can go at really big things, big monsters. And even though you've only got a crummy strength 2 bow, you'll probably need 6s to wound. However, because of Azog's free point of might, realistically you're only needing 5s. So you've then got a 33% chance each turn to wound something big, such as a hero or a monster, which will then suffer from the Morgul arrows rule unless they've been able to use some fate. In which case you're still taking fate off them, which is excellent. And your normal orc bows will not reliably be able to do that sort of hit and damage. So Azog can be good. I've had mixed success and failure with Azog. I've managed to take out a couple of heroes single-handedly with Azog's shooting, and then I've had a number of games where I've done absolutely nothing and been very uninvolved in the fight, which can be frustrating when you've got might just sat at the back of the table not doing a great deal. So I've rated Azog a 5 for hero killing because it's still only a strength 2 bow and you do only have an 18-inch range, so there is limitations, but you can do some damage to heroes, but you're not going to reliably take them out by yourself. But you wouldn't expect a 50-point model to do that anyway, to be fair. But it's nice that you can do damage on a 5, not needing a 6. In terms of troop killing, if you do just want to go at troops, Azog will wound the troops easier, again due to the might being able to wound with essentially a +1. And you can regularly take out maybe 2 troops every 3 turns with Azog, which is pretty good going. It means that by the end of the game you should have been able to get 5 or 6 kills, in which case you've paid your points back plus a little more maybe. Monsters is not really where Azog excels, because if they're defense 7 or higher, it's 6s by 4s, so even with the point of might you can help it with, it's probably still like 5s by 3s and 5s by 4s needed. So not really good against monsters, realistically. You've got to get some lucky rolling, and definitely not really going to do much in combat against them. In terms of survivability, Azog will usually be away from the main battle. You can keep them just behind the battle line to be used for heroic moves and shoot into combats and get on the flanks, shoot space supports, banners, and things like that. But generally you'll keep Azog a bit away from the fight and he will survive as a result of that. And the slightly higher defensive 5 means that Azog is not as easy to shoot as the Hunter Orcs around him. In terms of price, 50 points for the model and what it does. I think it's fair. You get the extra point of might, which is handy. You're only paying 5 points more than the captain, and you are getting a nice special rule, an extra point of might, and a named hero. In terms of special rules, I've put it as a 6 because it is a nice special rule. I think it is better than something like Yazneg's, which is situational. You can make use of this one a lot more. Just pick your targets wisely so you can maximise the output that you get out of Azog. And then Might Will Fate, I've done exactly the same rating of a 7 because it is the standard named hero 311. Azog rated 6.5 here. I think I would take Yazneg over Azog just because I like to have my minor named hero near Bolgor, Azog, or both to support them with the heroic moves, and with Azog you're more inclined to keep him a little away from the main fighting, in which case you can sometimes be left wasting their might just sat away from where you need it. So I'd maybe take Yazneg or Fimble over Azog, and that is a nice little segue into Fimble. So, Fimble the Hunter is an Orc infantry hero, hero of fortitude. He is move 6, fight 5, 4 strength, defense 5, attacks 2, wounds 2, courage 4, 3 might, 1 will, 1 fate. And he comes with an armour, sword, and an Orc bow. Standard, and he'll hit on a 5+, which would improve to a 4. He can also be put on a Felwarg for 10 points, which you will always want to do, and he has the heroic actions of Heroic Strike and special rules Expert Rider and Hunt Master. Now, Hunt Master means that Fimble ignores the penalties suffered by cavalry models when attempting to move in difficult terrain. So this even applies to give him the bonuses for charging, such as the knockdown and the extra attack. So he will not be held up by any terrain, which is quite a handy little rule and can surprise your opponents if there's like a little forest or some sort of difficult terrain between you and their model and they don't think you can reach. You can surprise them and go straight through. Now, the big things with Fimble over the other two heroes is he has the fight 5 compared to their fight 4. He also has courage 4 compared to Yazneg's 3. So if he's going to be the one that supports your main heroes, he's more likely to pass courage, he's more likely to win fights. The only thing he's less likely to do is he's not going to wound as easily as with Yazneg, who's got the lance. So it's really a bit of a trade-off in your mind. Do you consider having the higher fighting courage more useful than the lance? Or do you prefer having the more damage output but the lower fighting courage? Now, Personally, I've rated Fimble as 6.8 here. I've given him slightly higher on hero killing of a 6 because he has the higher fight. He's more likely to win against them. He's also more likely to charge them if they've got terror or something like that. He's not as good troop killing as Yazneg due to the lack of the lance, so you are having to use his strength 4 only. So if you come up against dwarves with defense 7 or a shield wall of some sort, it is going to be difficult to wound reliably or kill at least more than one a turn because you're going to be needing 6s. Even with a knockdown, you're not guaranteed to get that. So definitely better at engaging heroes, but not as good against troops. But it is only marginal in both cases. In terms of fighting monsters, he has got heroic strike, so he can win the fight slightly easier because he's got the higher fight as well to go towards his strike. But really, he's not suited to fighting monsters unless you're backing Azog or Bolg up with him to add in the extra fights and the potential strength 4 damage. In terms of survivability, he's got a slightly higher defense than the normal troops around him. Better courage means he will stay around at the end of the fight more reliably than Yazneg. And he has got 1 fate point. You do need to protect him on his warg on the way in. Get troops in the way, just like I've said with all the others. And he can do a lot of work for you. Priced very well, I'd say. You put him on the WAG, which I think you should always do. That's 60 points for what you get. The 3 might, the high fight, the high courage, decent defense, good strength. It's excellent. He can also shoot as well. You're not going to do it very often with him, but even if you move him half on his WAG at 5 inches, you can then take a pot shot. You might get something from that. Special rules, I think the Hunt Master is very good. Especially you go to tournaments, there's generally a lot of terrain to take advantage of. You can catch some opponents out with a very sneaky little rule, and then might will fare exactly like the other two, score of a 7 as it's the pretty standard named hero amount. And I've rated him slightly higher than the other two, 6.8. I would say in most cases you want to take Fimble over Yazneg. However, I generally take Yazneg over Fimble just because I prefer the model on Yazneg. I think it's a nicer looking model, more thematic as well, seeing as though he played a bigger part, I suppose. So moving on now, we go to the unnamed hero, which is the Hunter Orc Captain. Orc Infantry Hero, Hero of Fortitude, Movement 6, Fight 4, Strength 4, Defense 5, Attacks 2, 2 Wounds, 3 Courage, Might 2, 1 Will, and 1 Fate. He comes with armour and 2 swords. You can optionally put him on a Felwag. The model doesn't exist, however, for this Hunter Orc, whether mounted or unmounted, so you will have to make a conversion. You can also give him an Orc Bow for 5 points or a 2-handed pick for 5 points. Personally, I wouldn't give him any of those 3. Running a 45-point model, as good as he is, in with your infantry line to give you a bit of holding and killing power, and if you keep him central, he can be your main guy for a couple of heroic moves. That's my ideal way of playing him, I think. If you put him on the Felwag, why would you not just take the 2 named heroes that can do the same? For the extra 5 points, you've got the better killing power or the better fight in Yazneg and Fimble, and the extra might as well. One thing he does have, however, is he does have Heroic March, which the others don't have. So if that means a lot to your Heroic March, you can use him for that. But some of the other heroes aforementioned, such as Azog and Bolg, they have it as well. So if you want to march, you can also use them for that. I maybe wouldn't use Bolg for it because he has only got the limited 3 might. Special rules for the Hunter Orc Captain is he has many blades. Now, many blades is, whilst they have the infantry keyword, a model with a special rule receives +1 attack. So this Hunter Orc Captain on foot has 3 attacks standard. He is the lowest 3 attack model in the game, which is phenomenal, hence why I say take him on foot. By spending 10 points to mount him, you're actually making him weaker in the duel. Yes, he'll have the wounding potential on the charge of knocking them down, but really you want to keep him on foot. Now, discussing his characteristics and ratings, you don't really want to be putting up against heroes. He's got low fight compared to most other heroes and captains, only fight 4. He doesn't have strike to get up there higher. Really, you want to focus on this guy killing troops. He is very good at it. 3 attacks, I've given him 7 because if you give him the two-handed pick, you can also use your might to punch those duels up if you need. You will have reliable hitting power if you win the duel, and you can also piercing strike if you want to get him up to a strength 5. So even defense 7, you'll be wounding on only 4s. I think that's right. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's just top of my head. And in terms of monster mashing, again, you just don't want to get him into monsters. It's not a good way to get him killed. He might win the fight, and he would do a potential bit of damage. He can support your bigger heroes if they're fighting the monster as well. But alone, you're just going to get him killed most of the time. Focus on getting this guy into troops and troops only. He can survive with his fate and his slightly high defense, but he's not the most survivable. He'll also run away quite easily with only courage 3, especially if your opponent has some sort of harbinger of evil type effect going on. Price point though, I've given him a 7 because 45 points for a 3 attack model with 2 might is phenomenal. And his special rule, which is the many blades, it gives him 3 attack, is also brilliant. You definitely want to get him in there, get him killing troops, and this guy can do a lot of work for only 45 points. And then Might, Will, Fate, I've given him a 5 because it is the bog standard captain 211. And final rating of a 6. I would take one of the named heroes over him, definitely. However, if you've got a higher points game and you need a hero, you want someone to go in your front line of infantry, he's your guy, just because of the extra attack whilst on foot. Now moving on to the normal troops, there's not many of them. We've got the Hunter Orcs. Now these are 8 points, just 8 points, and they have the Many Blades special rule. So they are move 6, fight 3, they will shoot on a 5+, which will go down to a 4+ with the special rule of the army. They are strength 4, defense 4, 1 attack, however with the Many Blades, as long as they're on foot, they've got 2 attacks. 1 wound and courage 2. As standard, they come with armour and 2 blades, 2 swords. The options you can take them with is a Warhorn for 30 points, a Banner for 25, a Felwag for 8, an Orc Bow for 1, or a 2-handed pick for 1 point. So let's discuss those. So the Warhorn will get them up to a courage of 3. Now, that might not sound like much, but if you're taking a courage test on courage 2, you have a 41% chance of passing. If you are taking that same courage test with courage 3, you have a 56% chance of passing. I consider that quite a significant increase. To me, I see that as a good benefit. Taking them with a Warhorn also improves your hero's courage, because, believe it or not, Azog and Bolg can run, especially if you're up against a Terror army, Harbinger of Evil army, anything with magic that's already forced you to use your will. Courage 5 can sometimes fail. If you roll Snake Eyes or something bad like that, they're running. If you have a Warhorn in there, courage 6 is a lot harder to run away. You can rely on it a lot more. Also for your smaller heroes, especially Yazneg, he goes up to courage 4, which makes a big difference. You are going to be passing about 65% of the time. That is quite a big significant increase compared to only 1 lower. So I like having a Warhorn, but it's not for everyone. I do understand it does prevent you from getting a lot of extra bodies in there. I think it's worth it. When it comes to a banner, it's only a 3-inch banner. You don't have any spear supports with this army. You are generally going to have quite a spread out or thin line. It won't support that many combats each turn. You'll probably be supporting 5 or 6 fights at most. However, you are getting the rerolls. They do already have 2 attacks. It's almost like having the banner already. So it's whether you consider that worth it or not. The Felwag is 8 points on top of the 8 you're paying. You are doubling it up. It is expensive. 16 points for Hunter Orc mounted is a lot, considering Isengard Wag Riders are, I think, 12, 13 points. So that is quite expensive for what you're getting. However, it's worth having at least a few to run alongside your heroes and your Felwags to make sure you've got the knockdown bonuses. You've got something that can counter enemy cavalry if they've gone pretty cavalry heavy. Also for good mobility and objective capture, they can be very useful. Moving on to the Orc Bow. If you want to take them with bows, they will go up to a 4+ with the army bonus, which is decent, so you'll hit 50% of the time. They are still only strength 2 18-inch bows, so they do have a limitation there, but you can take up to 50%. So you can really take a lot of these guys. Now, what that means is you can be shooting at 4+, doing some damage, peppering the enemy, thinning their numbers down a little bit. And then once the lines actually engage, you've still got 2 attacks. And these guys are strength 4. They will do damage. So going all bows gives you a lot of flexibility here. You can do damage to your opponent on the way in, unless you're up against a real shooting army like Elves or Rangers of Ithilien, Legendary Legion, something like that. In which case, even if you've got the bows, you just really want to get in and engage as soon as possible because you will lose that shooting war. So do assess your opponent's army, what shooting they have, to decide whether you actually want to make use of your bows or not. But it's definitely worth taking on at least some of you guys, if not all the way up to the 50%. Gives you a lot of options in the battle to potentially control where things happen. And then last of all, they can get a 2-handed pick. Now, the 2-handed pick will make these guys real damage dealers. Your only problem is you're not going to win that many fights because you're only fight 3 as it is. And if you're getting a -1 on your duel roll, you're relying on your opponent rolling badly. And if you're up against anything with a shield wall, they've got a spear support, they're going to be rolling the same sort of amount of dice as you. And they'll likely have a higher fight than you, or at least the same. And then you're taking a -1 to your duel. You're going to be losing most of your duels. And then with your defense 4, these guys aren't sticking around. They are very squishy in all their forms, these Hunter Orcs. So the 2-handers, you can maybe take a couple in an army. And if you can get isolated one-on-ones on the flanks against spear supports or lone troops, you will have 2 attacks. They will only have 1, especially if you can keep them, if they're outside of their banner ranges, in which case you've got a decent chance of winning, and then you will likely kill. But that is about it for these guys. If they lose, they die, and they will lose most fights. So I personally I don't think 2-handers is the way to go with Hunter Orcs. Maybe 1 or 2 if you want to support heroes in big combats where you really want to wound. But they're not for me. Now, rating the Hunter Orcs, they're not great at hero killing. You don't really want to be doing that. You can put them in the way of heroes. The good thing with them is, though, you've got 2 attacks at strength 4. There's always potential to do damage, so you're not likely going to win the combats. You've got low fight. But if they fluff their roll and you win it, there's a decent chance you'll do a little bit of damage, which is a bit of a scary prospect for your opponent. And because you can have a lot of these guys, they can be trying to chew through them, but every time they fluff a roll and your guys win, there's a good chance you'll do a bit of damage. So they are at least pretty good for holding up enemies, and they're only 8 points. In terms of troop killing, they're very good. The strength 4, if you win fights, you're going to kill. If you lose the fights, you're going to be killed. There is no stalemate with this army and these guys. It's either kill or be killed. You definitely don't really want to be putting them in against monsters. They will likely die. You're just putting them in there as sacrifices if you are putting them in. You can put them in as supports against to help your heroes to get extra attacks to make sure they're winning fights, in which case there is also then a small chance they'll do. some damage as well, but don't rely on that. In terms of survivability, I've rated them a 1 because these guys are so squishy. My God, they die so easily. Something to watch out for as my biggest tip with Hunter Orcs. I love these guys using them. 2 attacks, you've got so many dice you're throwing at your opposition, it's excellent. You can envelop them, which is a strategy you don't really see in Middle-earth that often. Most people are like shield walling. But you can really envelop your army, your opponent's army, which is excellent. But just be aware, if you go up against other strength 4 troops, and they have defense 5 or higher, such as Moran and Orcs, Uruk-hai, anything like that, you will lose those engagements, especially if they've got pike or spear supports behind them. You're going to lose that fight over the long run. You want to delay those engagements. You want to avoid the head-on charge into their line against your line. You want to be trying to go around them. You want to split them. You want to maneuver. As long as you're not being shot to bits and you're kind of forced in, try and avoid those fights. Try and maneuver around them. Don't take the engagement unless you want to get yourself broken on purpose because you've got objectives. They will lose that fight. It's very, very dangerous for Hunter Orcs to be up against a supported strength 4, defense 5 or higher front line of your opposition. Be very careful of that, especially something like Isengard with the higher fight as well. You're not going to have fun against that with these. In terms of price for Hunter Orcs, they are excellent. 8 points for a 2 attack model with strength 4 is brilliant. Special rules as well, getting that extra attack, I've put it as a 9 because that is one of the best special rules that troops have in the game, I'd say. And then overall rating, give them a 5.5. They're not as good as the heroes, of course, so 5.5 is about as high as you can pretty much get for infantry, I'd say. They're excellent at what they do. They've got a lot of attacks, a lot of dice they chuck in. They've got decent strength. They do some damage. The shooting's not that bad on them either. Just know their limitations with their weak defense and weak courage. Play it right. I'd take the Warhorn, and you'll have some real fun with these guys. And then last of all, we've got the Felwargs. Now, on paper, these don't look like much. They move 10. They are classified as infantry. They have fight 3, strength 4, defense 4, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage 2. And they just have claws and teeth and the fell sight special rule. However, these guys are your fantastic utility. Love these guys. You can use them for so many things. You can use them to aggressively take and move onto objectives or flee the board as part of reconnoitre or scenarios like that. You can use them as fast meat shield supports for your heroes to make sure they stay covered from archer fire, and they will provide in the ways, and you will make sure that your heroes stay mounted until you get them into combat. You can also use these as fantastic flanking forces to move around and envelop your enemy, take off spear supports, attack banners, attack shooting. They also can get in the way with the big cavalry bases, even though they're infantry. You can use them to get in the way and block control zones and block movement, hold up enemy heroes, or just hold up big blocks of shield walls and troops while you're doing some sneaky things around the sides. Fantastic utility troops. I use them for all different things. They do die. They don't put out that much damage, and once you break, they're going to run unless they've got a hero nearby. But my God, they are so useful in the first few turns, and even the middle of the fight as well. You've usually got at least a couple of them left, and they just are brilliant at getting in the way and blocking things for the opposition. That's the main thing. Use the bases effectively to block people getting to where you don't want them to be. So in terms of ratings, they look quite low, but this is because it's infantry. The infantry ratings are not going to get much higher than 5. So hero killing 2, I've given them a 2, not a 1, because on the odd occasion they win a fight against a hero that fluffs it, they will get a chance at doing a wound because they are strength 4. In terms of troop killing, again, if they win the fight, they've got strength 4, they will wound. And if you put them up against monsters, you're just putting them in as sacrifices. It's very rare they'll win. If they do, you've got a tiny chance they'll do a bit of damage, but it's unlikely. You are putting them in as sacrifices. Survivability I've put as 1. They do die. They're just as squishy as your Hunter Orcs, and they're also targeted a bit more because of them being able to move fast and them shielding your big heroes. But for a price of only 8 points, I think they are priced fairly. Not brilliantly. I wish there were 6 or 7 points. But they've been given the extra point because of Fell Sight, which you don't really use that much. So it's a bit disappointing that, but still fair price, I think. And then I've given the special rule only 4 because Fell Sight's it's not the best special rule, really. And then a final rating of a 4, which is actually pretty good for infantry. These are excellent utility troops. So now we've finished looking at all the different parts of the army. We're now going to look at the strengths and weaknesses of the army. Some of it will have already been evident to you as a result of what we've discussed, but the main strengths of this force is you have formidable heroes. You have 2 big hitters to choose from. You can take one or the other or both. They will survive. They will last most, if not all, the battle. They'll do a lot of damage. They will keep your other troops around with their standfasts, their good courage, and they will put out a lot of damage. They are terrifying to face and hard to deal with for the opposition. They have to focus a lot of resources on Azog or Bolg, in which case you can do a lot of other things with the rest of your army while they're heavily focusing on just these guys. Another strength is you have a lot of attacks. The 2 attacks on the Hunter Orcs means that you are throwing out a lot of dice, especially if you can do a thin line, spread your enemy out, envelop them, isolate them in one-on-ones. You've got the 2 attacks, they've got the 1. They can't have banners everywhere, and unless it's something like fiefdoms with Imrahil's ridiculous banner. Yeah, you're going to get a lot of benefit from having so many dice you're throwing at your opponent. You do have a lot of killing power. It's a very killy army, is this. Everyone's strength 4 or higher. That means anything up to strength 6, you're going to be wounding on 5s or less. Yeah, you've got a good chance of doing damage if you win fights. You've got mobility. You've got fast heroes that can nearly all be mounted. Well, they can all be mounted, actually. It's just I wouldn't recommend it on one of them. You've got cavalry. It's expensive cavalry, but it's still cavalry, and you do want to take a few of them to support your flanks and your guys. And also you've got fast-moving infantry. The fast-moving Felwargs to be able to get after objectives is fantastic. Also, being able to dig up things in certain scenarios is another massive benefit. You've got good special rules with this army, so Azog being able to hero kill on a 3+ regardless of their defence. His 12-inch standfast is excellent, especially considering the army is a low courage army. And then Bolg's incremental killing upgrades are 1, they're just fun. Fun to use and fun to try and get up to the Mighty Hero 10 kills. But also they're really effective. So having Terror on Bolg makes it more difficult to charge, meaning you can get the Wag charging 4 attacks, 8 on knockdown, and do a lot more damage. You've got Harbinger of Evil, which will make it even more difficult. It can also be great if you're up against another low courage army. And then on top of that, you've got the Mighty Hero if you do get to the 10, which is always feels like quite an achievement. And then last strength, I'd say, is you've got the improved shooting. So being able to take 50% bows and having Orc archers that hit on a 4 with Nazog that can hit on a 3. With his own special rules, it can be a fun shooting army. It's not going to be effective against a big elven shooting army, but it can still do a decent amount of damage against most armies. So yeah, it's a good strength to have. And the army does unfortunately have quite a lot of weaknesses as well. So it means it's quite a balanced army, as much of the Middle Earth strategy battle game is, in my opinion. Such a well-balanced game. They have low fight value across the board. So other than Azog and Bolg, which have extraordinarily high fight values, and you've got to love them for it when you're using them. It's amazing. Fight 3 across all your normal troops means that you're reliably going to have the lower fight the majority of cases. So even if you roll well, you're still going to be losing quite a lot of fights, and then your guys are quite squishy and will die. You are limited to then unit variety of just Hunter Orcs and Felwargs. Both are excellent troops, and you do have a few different variations within them, but you are limited to those types, and they are also both only this fight 3, and they are both just defense 4. So you've got a very squishy army that has a decent chance of losing fights because of the low fight value. So you've got to make up for that by having a lot of attacks, by picking your fights well, using heroic moves to make sure you're the one moving first and picking the engagements. Another weakness is your courage. Now, so low courage, not only for your troops but also for your heroes. As I've said earlier in the video, I think the Warhorn is the thing to take, just to make sure you've got at least above 50% chance of them passing. You want to keep them, especially near the end of the battle, near Bolg and Azog for the standfast, so they're not all running away, unless you do want to break, in which case these guys are fantastic at getting themselves broken and then quartered, because they can all run away very easily if you separate them from the heroes. You'll also have a bit of trouble against terror armies, so a Warhorn helps that a bit, but especially if you've got a Terror Harbinger of Evil army, even if with a Warhorn they'll push you down to a 2. If you haven't taken a Warhorn, you go down to Courage 1, in which case you are only passing 28% of your Courage tests on average, which is pitiful, and they're going to be completely controlling the engagements. Now, there's ways you can combat these 4 weaknesses before I discuss the last one. So with the fight value weakness, you want to outnumber the opposition and try and isolate their guys one-on-one, in which case you have a lot more attacks than them, and them having a higher fight will have to rely on them rolling freakishly high all the time to beat you and not get killed. So that's the tactic. You want to envelop, you want to stretch them, you want to try and isolate their guys one-on-one. The defense, you want to be avoiding the bad matchups, the bad fights. Consider what you're up against. If you're up against anything with a strength 3, you're probably fine engaging them head on, because they'll kill you on 5s, you'll likely kill them on 5s. If they're strength 4, and they've got a defensive higher than a 4, you don't want that engagement. The statistics just clearly don't favour you. They're going to be wounding you on a lower number than you're going to be wounding them. It's not worth it. You need to be smartly manoeuvring away from those engagements and trying to optimize the fights to isolate them at least one-on-one, so you've got the extra attack over them. And then in terms of courage, the best thing I've found for dealing with this, if you are going with the Azog's Hunters, is take the Warhorn and try and kill off terror-causing troops ASAP. So if you come up against a Mordor army with Black Numenorians as the front line, everyone causing terror, throw Bolg in, throw Azog in, ignore their heroes, just get straight in and take out as many of these terror-causing troops as you can. And it will really help you being able to then move the rest of your army. Otherwise, they will get paralysed quite easily. Can't recommend highly enough the Warhorn. I really think it is worth it, just based on statistically how much of a difference it makes in terms of how many guys you'll be able to get into combat compared to if you don't have it. And then last of all, magic. So magic's the one you can't do a great deal about. You've got very limited will. Azog's got the most with the White Warg, with 4 in total. Use it sparingly, so if they roll particularly high on their casting roll, you're probably not worth resisting it unless you are really in a position where your guy's probably going to get killed if you don't. If you think you can survive it and it's not the end of the world, or it's just stopping you from killing for that turn, if they've cast it on a high roll, 5 or especially a 6, it's probably not worth you wasting your will. Save it for when they've cast it on a 3 or a 4 when you've got a good chance. Just try and be smart with it, and again, play percentages of your likelihood of getting it back, and hope that you roll 6s and get the will back. Now then, moving on to allies and alternatives. So Azog's Hunters come with 2 historical allies. You've got Azog's Legion and Dark Powers of Dol Guldur. Now Azog's Legion, it's quite a large list with a lot of different options. I've only written onto here the few that I think are worth it and benefit this army. One of which I do recommend highly, and I do this a lot myself, is if Azog or Bolg is your leader, which most of the time will be, if you put them in Azog's Legion as a separate entity and then take a full Azog's Hunters list with hero fortitude like a Yazneg or Fimble or something, Azog or Bolg will get the Master of Battle, meaning that any enemy hero within 6 inches of you that causes a heroic action, you get to copy it for free. So this really negates their ability to heroic move. You will get it for free. They will be burning through their resources. It'll also make them second guess doing it. On top of that, because both Azog and Bolg are so high with their fight value of 7, enemy heroes near them are going to be trying to do heroic strike to match and be able to fight you. However, if you've got Master of Battle, you're getting it for free while they're wasting, again, more resources. So they're going to be even less likely to try and engage you. Or if you engage them and they're forced to call one, again, you get it for free. So this is an excellent tactic to use. I would really recommend this, and I use this a lot myself. You've just got to be careful making sure you've got enough warband size to still be able to get all the Azog Hunters troops in that you want. You can take other things from Azog's Legion to complement the Azog's Hunters. There is Gundabad Orcs you can take that will provide you shields and spears, both of which are useful. You can have the shields at the front of your Hunter Orcs initially while you're moving up the battlefield to give you the protection from shooting. The shield will give them defense 6, meaning that anything other than crossbows will be wounding them on 5s and 6s. It will be wounding them on 6s. It'll be crossbows wounding them on 5s. And then on top of that, the spears will give support, so you can switch the lines over when you're getting to combat. Have the Hunter Orcs at the front with that extra attack behind them, which can really help turn the tide of an engagement. And then the last one from Azog's Legion is the Gundabad Berserkers. Now these guys have courage 6, so they've got even higher courage than Azog and Bolg. Fantastic for objective holding, fantastic to try and combat terror armies. It's just good to have a few of these guys just to give you that flexibility of being able to deal with that. They do cost 15 points compared to the Hunter Orcs 8, and the only additional things you're really getting is the higher courage, the slightly higher fight of 4, which can be useful, of course, up to fight 4, and they've also got the slightly higher defense, so they are a little more resilient to shooting. I wouldn't take many of these guys, they are expensive, but you can consider taking a couple of these just to help you if you do come up against terror. It is quite popular, especially in tournaments. And then the other historical ally is Dark Powers of Dol Guldur. Now, you can take the Necromancer, but he is 250 points. He is the only magic support you can get from any of your historical allies, and it is a massive point sink. He only has 1 attack, and yes, he provides excellent magic support, but he can only cast 1 a turn, and it's a huge point sink, and it's almost impossible to make that back in a battle, unless you are up against something such as another terror magic army, in which case he can provide protection and damage and can immobilize the enemy. I would not consider really taking Necromancer with Azog's Hunters unless you're getting up to 900, 1,000 points, and even then I'd still consider leaving him behind. You can take Nazgul as well from this list. They get the teleport essentially each turn 6 inches from where they last were and died, and they will survive. They'll keep returning each turn up to a point, but I don't really see the point in taking these. You've got a few tricks with a few, like the Lingering Shadow, which I've seen another army analysis video mention, which was quite an interesting concept. But I don't think it's the way to go, really, with the Nazgul. They've only got 2 attacks, 1 wound. They will keep dying, and it's quite a big point sink for not a great deal. They won't do a lot of damage by themselves. So really, what are you taking them for, really, considering you could have 9 Hunter Orcs for the same? So you can have 18 attacks compared to the 2 you're going to get from this Nazgul. Is it worth it? Ones I would consider taking and have taken regularly is Keeper of the Dungeons. He provides you another high courage model that can be good against terror causing armies. He has a high fight value of 5. He has 3 might, which is excellent as a might caddy. He can also lead your infantry line instead of the Hunter Orc captain. And he's a better might caddy because he's got 3 might, not 2. And you can rely on him to do a lot of damage, especially if you've taken a Gundabad Orc with a spear, at least 1, to go with him. He will then have 3 attacks with that support. You can have a banner nearby to help him, to make sure he doesn't fluff the dual rolls. He is strength 5. He can piercing strike with a 2-handed weapon, so he'll be strength 6 with a +1 to wound. He will reliably kill whatever he's up against. He also has heroic strike, so he can take on heroes. I really like this guy. Only weakness is he has 0 fate and 2 wounds. He does have defense 6, but you do need to protect him on the way into combat and avoid him getting in with really big heroes. Because if he loses the fight, he dies. And you don't want him to die with might on him. So you can be quite aggressive using his might for heroic moves, combats, and even wounds on important things. Yeah, he's an interesting model to use. He also has his own special rule, a bit like Bolg, where he gets additional special rules based on kills, but they are a lot smaller. You only need to kill 1 model to get re-rolling 1s to wound. 2 kills, he gets terror, and then 5 kills, he gets to re-roll all failed wounds. So he can be quite the killer. I like to take him, and I also like to take him because it's the only way you can get Castellans into your army. So Castellans only classify as minor heroes. They can't be taken as their own alliance by themselves. They do need something else. So you take the Keeper with some guys, and then you put in the Castellan. And the reason you take the Castellan is high fight of 5, high courage of 6. They're good against terror. They've got 2 attacks. They will deal damage with strength 5. They will survive because 12 will, all of which can be used as fate, is brilliant. But the biggest reason to take Castellans is they can hold up enemy heroes for a long time. You can just completely bog them down in a Castellan. If you keep getting priority and you're using might points, if you've got Azog and the Keeper nearby, and you can keep heroic moving, or you're winning priority, you've got Master of Battle nearby, they're not wanting to do heroic moves, they're wasting all their resources. Having a Castellan nearby to just keep going into your enemy's big hitter, you've got a 40-point model that can hold up a 200-point Gilgalad or a big Glorfindel or something like that, and he'll just tarp hit them. They'll just get stuck on him turn after turn, and it's fantastic. It's demoralizing for the opposition, and it just takes away a huge amount of their damage potential while you go about and do other things with your big hitter like Azog or Bolg. And they're so cheap, just 40 points. So it's interesting to take them. I've had good success using them, the Keeper and the Castellans, so I would recommend this along with the Master of Battle Azog or Bolg allied into a then pure Azog Hunter list. Worth mentioning as well, you do have a few convenient allies to choose from. There are the Dark Denizens of Mirkwood, so you can get in some spiders and bats. There is Desolator of the North. If you're going on a ridiculously high point game, you can convenient ally them into Smaug. You've got Goblin Town if you want a bit of a horde in there, or you want the Goblin King. Moria and the Trolls as well are options for you. Personally, I don't do this at all. I'm not so keen on the convenient alliances. Also, if you do add in a convenient alliance, you can't then get the Master of Battle Historical Alliance special rule for Azog or Bolg, which is quite a big loss. You also will lose the improved shooting of Azog's Hunters. So I'd maybe avoid this as well for that reason. So I'd just consider the 2 historical allies, and that's it. Now moving on to competitive play and tactics. So we'll discuss deployment first of all. So one thing for you to remember is people fear Azog and Bolg. They have reputations. There is such a thing as bolging, which exists for a reason. Both of them are fearsome characters. People understand that they are Fight 7. They have a lot of might. They are big hitters. So what you want to do is deploy them last, if at all possible, to keep your opponent guessing and so you can decide where to position them for optimal damage. So Bolg, you want to focus on troop killing. So wherever your opponent has positioned a lot of troops, where there isn't many heroes or threatening heroes nearby, where Bolg can just chew on troops until he's got to his upgraded version. And with Azog, you want to deploy him last, so you can choose where you want to position him to hero hunt, essentially. You want to be aggressive with Azog, take out your opponent's heroes, cut off the head of the snake, and the rest will fall. If you're playing a pure Azog's Hunters with no spear supports, you want to deploy reasonably spread out, still so they can support each other, but you want to spread them out with the intention of enveloping your enemy. So a thin line with a wider flank of engagement than your opposition, preferably on both sides, and try and go around them, and then you can start peeling off spear supports, isolate troops one-on-one. They're the fights that you will win. You can also get onto objectives. That way you can also get onto any shooting they've got remaining at the back, and also any banners or support heroes. It's a really good tactic for this army. You've got the mobility as well to get around the sides. You can also just go in with a hard-hitting front force with Azog and Bolg and some cavalry, and get your Hunter Orcs round the sides to pick off spears and things, as I say. And your big heroes down the middle will deal with the shield wall for you. And last thing, consider Hunter Orcs with bows and Felwargs to be your main objective capture units. So have this in the back of your mind when you're deploying. Who is going to be your objective holder? Who is going to be going for objective capture? Who is going to be running off the board if you need them? And position them with these considerations in mind. Hunter Orcs with bows are excellent at holding objectives at the back. A couple of them sat there, they might get some shots in. Anything that comes to try and take the objectives, they can shoot at as well. And even if they reach them, you've still got 2 attacks on each model. Your Felwargs, they're fast, they can get to the other side of the board quickly, and they can capture objectives. Now moving on to gameplay. So I've said it all the way through the video so far, but to really reiterate the point, you want to protect from shooting on the way in. All your heroes, especially your mounted ones, they are vulnerable to shooting. You want to protect them. Use meat shields and terrain as best you can to protect them and keep them mounted. That is paramount. You'll likely take some casualties on the way in. Again, your troops are very squishy as well. Try and use terrain as best you can to help them and protect them. This army might be squishy, but it hits hard, and you can hit fast, and you should be aggressive. You've got a lot of resources, you've got a lot of might. Use them to get an advantage early and hold it. And by this, what I mean is, if you get the opportunity to hit a hero hard and kill it, while it still has might on the table, get it done. Use a little bit of might yourself to do that. If you see an opportunity to isolate and take out a big monster where you can gang up on it, do it. You might use a few resources, but you've got a lot to use. You can also gain them back later on if you get Bolg to might a hero. You can also keep it with Master of Battle on Azog, or Bolg if they're part of Azog's Legion. Be aggressive, play fast. Once sustained combat happens, your troops are going to either kill or be killed. Most likely the latter. There's no slow stalemates or slogs with this army, so this is why I'm saying you want to hit hard first, try and get an advantage and hold it, because once it goes into a long grind, your troops lose. So you want to get the objectives at that point, use your heroes to still be causing damage and hold up your enemy, while your Felwargs and your Hunter Orcs with bows get the objectives for you. Next, you want to envelop your enemy. I keep saying this, you want to envelop them. Isolate them in one-on-one fights. Your big advantage in this army is you have 2 attacks per model. Your opponent has 1. You've also got decent strength of 4. So get them in one-on-one fights. You will win more often than not, and you will have a good chance of killing them. Keep a lesser hero near your big hitters as a might caddy. Now, this is for heroic moves. This means they can save their might for duels, wounding, and, as I mentioned, the odd, occasional, necessary counter-strike. It's just a good play, a good ploy. The lesser heroes, they're going to do damage, but you don't really want to be using their might for that, because they're not in 60-point models are not in the army to carry the battle for you. They're there for utility and might and support. And in this case, that's exactly what you want to use them for. You want them to support the big heroes while they do the work and carry the army. So keep them nearby. Keep them mounted, usually a Yasneg or a Thimble. Keep them mounted near Azog or Bolg, and you can use them. Keep them central as well, so they will get as many in the heroic moves as possible. And next, I've mentioned it earlier, but a massive part of gameplay is if you come up against terror units, remove them as quick as you can with your heroes. Your big hitters should reliably charge them and should be able to kill them regardless of what they are. Azog and Bolg hit like a truck. They will kill what they are up against. You just need to get them in, do the damage, and that will allow your army to move as normal then. Otherwise, it will really cause you trouble and paralyse a lot of your troops. Because this army breaks and quarters quite quickly, especially as I mentioned when sustained combat happens, the game can end very quickly. You do want to be playing the objectives from the very start of the game. Utilise your Felwargs' 10-inch movement and their infantry keyword for objectives such as digging things up in the middle. This is a key to winning. You want to be playing it from the start because the game can end quickly, and suddenly you want to be in a good position when it does. Something else to consider is your heroes can deal out a lot of damage in one turn. This army is very possible at dealing out flash kills. So if you see a big monster hero, such as, I don't know, like an Ent, like a Beachbone or something like that, or you're up against a Boromir, or any sort of big hero, if you can gang up on them, get them trapped, if you win that fight, you are going to dish out a lot of damage and likely get a flash kill on a really big hero. You can even remove a lot of might off the table in one go. And the last thing, this is a slight negative really, but just something to always be mindful of. The improved shooting and the 50% bows you get with this army is good, but they are still only strength 2 18-inch bows, so you do have limited killing power. Use a few to hold objectives. If they charge, they've still got 2 attacks. They will do some work for you. You can always have them moving up if you've got the 50% of them. Move up 3 inch at a time, doing some shots if your opponent doesn't have shooting or much shooting themselves. But if you are against a proper shooting army, remember you are limited. You are not the best shooting army, you're just a decent shooting army. So that's the end of the competitive player tactics discussion. So now we're going to move on to the different types of armies you can build with this faction. So I've said there's only 4. You could also go pure cavalry, but because of how expensive they are, you probably wouldn't. So discussing the first one here, we've got the hero hit squad. This is my personal favourite way of running it, just because of how effective Azog and Bolg are and how reliable they are at carrying the battle for you. 700 points or more, Azog and Bolg, get them doing the hard hitting, have a bit of a small hit squad of the two of them, plus one of the lesser named heroes for Mike Caddy, as I've mentioned before, for the heroic moves, with a mobile army around them of Warg Riders and Felwargs. You still want a small contingent of infantry, whether that be a few bows or a few infantry to go around the sides to surprise the enemy once your cavalry forces hit the middle of the army. As I say, you can flash kill enemy heroes and monsters with this. It's fun, it hits hard, it moves fast, it catches your opponent off guard and keeps them off balance because they've got a couple of real big issues to deal with, and they are so difficult to deal with even by themselves that when you put them together, it's almost impossible for your opponent to deal with, and it gives them a real headache and problem. Not many people can overcome it. Your only issue is if they play heavy on the objective and you can't get around to them, they can beat you on points. Even if you're winning the battle, you can be losing the scenario. So bear that in mind. You still need to be playing the scenario from the start with this one, but it's really fun. You get to hit hard with Azog and Bolg. The next one you can go with is a horde army. So you can hit them with a horde of troops. You've got 8-point models, whether it's the Felwargs, whether it's the Hunter Orcs. Go in with maybe one of Bolg or Azog, or just Fimbul, Yazneg, Narzug, a few of the named heroes, Hunter Orc captains. Hit them with so many overwhelming attacks that they can't deal with it. You make a really thin line. You march up. It doesn't matter if you take casualties on the way in. You will get around them. You will outflank them. It's worth taking maybe multiple banners in this list just to support the maximum amount of troops and just completely overwhelm them with the sheer number of dice that you can throw at them. There is also the consideration that you could take no banners at all and go for an even bigger force. As I say, because you're running such a thin line, the banners will only ever support a maximum of 5 or 6 fights anyway, so it is your own choice there as to whether you consider it worth it or not. A banner, you could get an extra 4 guys. Is it worth it? Is it not? That's a decision for you to consider. The next army type is a shooting force, so you can take 50% bows. You've got the 4+ shooting. If you get Bolg and Narzug in the same army, you'll have the Morgul Arrows special rule for dealing with multi-wound enemies. And you can whittle down your enemy on the way in. If they don't have any shooting at all, you can force them to come to you and engage you where you want them to. And last of all, there's the balance list, where you take one of the big hitters, take a few bows to hold on to objectives on your side of the board, get a small mobility force to get around and support the mounted Azog or Bolg, and also to get to objectives on the other side of the board, and then have a reasonable contingent of infantry to do a lot of damage, give you a decent weight of attacks, and that can also work. And we'll see a few examples as we move on to the example armies. There is a few questions that I think need answering before we go into army building, though. So when it comes to... Oh, what have I done here? So when it comes to army building, do you take Azog, do you take Bolg, or do you take both of them? Now, personally, I like to take both if it's 700 or above. If it's less than 700, then it's one or the other, unless you want to go full horde, in which case take a few of the named heroes, maybe the Hunter or Captain. Azog gives you more than Bolg out of the gate. He's got the 6 might, you've got the more survivable White Warg, you've got the 3+ wounding on heroes, and the bigger standfast as well for when you do inevitably get broken. If you're going for a shooting army though, you do want to get Bolg with Azog. And as I say, if you go 700 or more, I prefer to take both. I really enjoy using both of them. They offer you so much, and they can carry a battle by themselves, even if they are costing 400 of that 700 points. In terms of Fimble, Yazneg, or Azog, so if you're going shooting, if you really want to go 50% shooting, Bolg and Azog as the combination, that's what you do. Otherwise, I would always take Fimble or Yazneg first over Azog, because they can be mounted. The model exists for them. One has a higher fight, one has the higher potential to wound. They can run around and keep up with Azog or Bolg mounted, and they can be a good might support caddy. If you're taking a Warhorn, I would take Yazneg for the higher damage output. And if you are not taking a Warhorn, Fimble is the more reliable fight, courage hero to take. Now, Hunter Orc captains, you're wondering, is there maybe a place for them in the army? And for me, there is, because they fill a bit of a niche. Because Fimble or Yazneg, you always want to be mounting and running them with your other mounted big hero. Azog, you want to be taking with your bows, and really you've got nothing to lead your infantry line. And a Hunter Orc captain has got 3 attacks. It does a decent amount of damage. When it wins fights, strength 4, 3 attacks, it's really good. And if you position them centrally, it can be really good for a couple of heroic moves to make sure you keep control of the fights and engagements. So I'd say there is a place for them. I would definitely always take one of the named heroes first after one of the big hitters. But then my next consideration would be, do I take another named one, or do I take the Hunter Orc captain to go with the infantry? It depends on how important your infantry and backing them up is. In terms of mounting the heroes, I would mount all the heroes except Azog or the Orc captains. Azog you could mount. It doesn't exist. You would have to convert, but you would be able to move and shoot it. He'd still hit on 4+ when shooting, when moving. So that's still pretty good, 50% of the time. But it seems a bit of a waste of points to me, because you're not really going to be using the cavalry knockdown in charge, and likely your opponent will be shooting back at your archers if they've got any, in which case you could lose that wag and then you've just wasted points. The Hunter Orc captain is actually better on foot than mounted, because you're actually losing a point with losing an attack, even though you've spent more money on mounting them, more points on mounting them. So to me, it's not worth it. In terms of Felwargs, so Felwargs, they will die, and they don't have the extra attack that the Hunter Orcs do, but they have that incredible mobility, the bigger bases, and a lot of utility. So I would take minimum 4 to 6, probably between 6 and 8 I think is optimal, to give you flexibility to cover your heroes, to pick off stuff in fights, provide support, block your enemy up, act as sacrifices to some of the bigger things. They're really, really useful in all engagements. Moving on to Hunter Orcs, is it worth bringing Hunter Orcs mounted? I'd say yes. They are expensive at 16 points for what you're getting, but you want at least a couple. Run them alongside your heroes and your Felwargs. It will help your Felwargs to be able to knock things over, get them prone, get the double attacks, get the kills. Otherwise, you are limiting your killing power a bit. Having a few of these can really help. Also, it gives your opponent a bit of a decision to make. Do they shoot to try and take out your hero's wargs, or do they try and thin your cavalry? And it can sometimes help protect your heroes a bit by giving that distraction as well. So something else to consider. Next is in relation to banners. So I've discussed it on the previous slide that there is such a thin line. You don't have space supports. You're not going to be supporting that many fights. Normally your battle line will start to spread and spread the more the engagement goes on. Your banner can also be very easily isolated and got to. So because it's such a thin line, you don't need much to die for your opposition to be able to break through and get to your banner. they can die very easily. So then it's a bit of a wasted point sink. 33 points wasted. Personally, from my usage of the banners, they've died in nearly every battle, and I don't feel I've got my points out of them most of the time. So I'm sitting on the side of not considering the banner to be worth it in this army. In most armies, almost all armies, it is worth taking a banner at all times. But just for this one, because of how thin your line is, you've already got 2 attacks, and how easy it is for the opposition to break through and get to yours because of how squishy your army is, the banner's just too exposed and will die. It's just difficult to get the most out of and keep it alive. On the flip side to this, the Warhorn, you can put the Warhorn on your orcs with bows that are going to be sat at the back on an objective that won't be engaged likely, and you can also keep them hidden with terrain pieces or behind a tree or something still shooting within the ways. Your Warhorn is unlikely to die. I've used them so many times now, and I'm yet to have my Warhorn get killed. He's ran away once, which is funny, but he's not died. So I would recommend the Warhorn. In regards to which war gear for the Hunter Orcs, so depends on how you want to play, but I've mentioned the issue with the two-handing pick option for Hunter Orcs. They're not going to win many fights, and because they've got such low defense, they're going to die. So you can throw them all into combat, but they all die so quickly, and only 1 or 2 actually ever get to throw a wound at the opposition. And even though they're more likely to do the wound, and they likely will, all his mates around him are already dead. So I really don't think they are worth it. Maybe a maximum of 1 or 2. If you can isolate things on the flanks away from banners, maybe you can get your money's worth. But even then, it's not reliable. In terms of the bows, if you want to go full bows, 50% of them, great. They are pretty good for orcs in particular. 4+ shooting, that's fantastic. But yeah, it does cost an extra point, 9 points for what they are. It's whether you consider it worth it or not. They are only 18 in strength 2 bows. You can even take them in your normal infantry line and move them up 3 inches at a time and shoot if your opponent doesn't have very good shooting or any at all. I'd take a few always. You always want a few honesty bows, hold objectives, shoot from a distance. But that's it. For me, I don't go full shooting with this army, but you can. It is possible. I've tried it once or twice to mixed success. And yeah, that's the end of that. Let's move on to some example armies. So 500 point example armies. So this is a 50% bow army. So Azog to shoot some big stuff with some wounds, such as the heroes, shoot their horses off them perhaps. You'll wound them easier because of the free might that you can use. Adding in Bolg into this also gives you the Morgul arrows. And I've split the bows across the warbands to make sure that you've got them spread around the battlefield, so you've got different angles and lines of fire, so it's more difficult for your opposition to defend against the angle of fire. Also, you've got then a bit more flexibility with going towards objectives and holding them. I've still put a couple of wargs in here and Hunter Orcs on wargs to go with Bolg on his. So you've got a bit of a cavalry hitting force. You can flank, you can hit hard, you can go for a bit of a hero hunt. Predominantly going to be wanting to try and move around slowly here, shoot, keep that cavalry force in reserve, and then if your opponent gets too close, you see an opportunity, you can suddenly hit hard and get in there while still shooting at space supports and whatever else hasn't been able to quite get in on your little cavalry force. You've got only 8 might in this army. For 500 points, I think that's about average. And 28 models, though, that's pretty good. I'd say that's above average. You should have decent success with this against most armies. Only issue I'd see is if you came up against a terror army and they had high defence, you'd struggle with your shooting and the engagement wouldn't suit you. You would struggle to get people involved. So we move on to the second one. We have Azog running a fast, hard-hitting army with a couple of Hunter Orcs on Felwargs to go with them. Azog and Fimble, they will look to team up. You can do a lot of damage when you first get in. You've got 17 Hunter Orcs. They can go around either side of the cavalry force and start to envelop the enemy. Just the sheer weight of attacks plus the big hitting in the middle that will hold the centre. This can do some real damage quickly, catch your opponent on the back foot and keep them there. You've also got one bow just to hold on to objectives. The Felwargs can also help with that, and the normal Hunter Orcs. You've got still 28 models, despite the fact you've paid extra for having Azog. And you've also got 9 might in this army, so an extra point there as well. Now moving on to 700 points. This one is the example of a Horde army. So you've got 38 models in here and 11 might. So Azog, 215 points, still got a small hit force of cavalry to go alongside Hunter Orcs and a banner. So you want to keep that infantry line together. You maybe want to do 2 rows, so even if your first row dies, you've got a second row that can step in. It'll also give a bit more support to your banner. You've got Fimble that can team up with Azog when needed. A Hunter Orc captain can get in with his banner and group of Hunter Orcs. You can have a decent front line then, as long as you're not up against strength 4, defense 5+ front lines. This will do well against almost everything else. You've also got a couple of bows, and I've put in a Warhorn as well, just to make sure you're able to get the charges with all those infantry models, and it just assists Azog and Fimble staying around late on in the battle when you need them to. And hopefully your few guys on objectives will stick around as well. And then last of all, I'm going to show you a very different flavour of 700 points, which is the Hero Hit Squad. This is actually an army that I've taken to a tournament, and I will be taking to another tournament in 2 weeks. This is what I mentioned before, putting in Azog as a historical ally in the Azog's Legion. This gets him the Master of Battle. Also with Azog's Legion, you can give him heavy armour. You could also give him the Stone Flail, but that does cost quite a lot. And generally, because I'm going to go heavy on Bolg and Azog, I'm going to have Bolg for the troop killing, Azog for the hero killing, so I don't really need the additional troop killing on Azog anyway. The warband I've got here is Bolg with 6 Felwargs and 2 Hunter Orcs on Felwargs. This gives you a really hard-hitting force. The Felwargs also provide you base blocking. They can block things in while Azog and Bolg go after the things they really want to damage and isolate. There's also Yazneg with his Lance and Felwarg. He'll catch up and get near the 2 of them and be the Might Caddy, as I mentioned before. Heroic moves. He can also do damage himself with his Lance in charging as well. Keep him central, and he's your main guy for heroic moves. Really good tactic. And then I've got a couple of bows with Warhorns, with a Warhorn as well, just to make sure we've got everyone charging, we've got them sticking around. Courage is good. A couple of bows for the objectives, and then some Hunter Orcs. So we've got a total of 14 Hunter Orcs, disregarding the 2 with bows. They will go around the sides of my initial hard-hitting frontal cavalry hit, and they will look to get around the back onto spears, envelop, and go after archers and things like that in the back. You have only got 27 models, which is extremely small for 700 points. You will break quite quickly, but really you want to be keeping your Hunter Orcs out of the combat for the first turn or 2. You want to get them into position on the flanks. You want to rely on Azog, Bolg, Yazneg, and the Hunter Orcs on Felwargs, hitting and doing damage in the first turn or 2 and not really taking much of a casualty back, other than a couple of Felwargs perhaps. And the big thing with this army is you've got 12 might, plus the Master of Battle on Azog, and the potential of Bolg getting to Mighty Hero. So you've got Might for days, so you can burn the resources early to really hit hard, and you can actually intentionally get yourself broken pretty quick if you've done enough damage and got the objectives straight away. Interesting tactic, and it's just a lot of fun to use. I've played multiple games with it. It's caught all my opponents off guard early on. It's got them on the back foot. It's kept them there. They've struggled to deal with the hard-hitting power, and I've just overwhelmed them and won just with the sheer power. And the Hunter Orcs have done very little. They've just gone around the back and done a bit of mop-up at the end, and it's avoided me being broken. So this is the my personal favourite of the armies. It is very elite. You've got to be careful how you use it, but once you know what you're doing, this sort of army is very fun. So let's move on now to rating the army as a whole. This is the final ratings now. So what we're discussing here is, can it deal with the main things you're going to come across in Middle-earth strategy battle game? And that is, first of all, can it deal with big heroes? The answer is an overwhelming yes. Azog and Bolg are some of the biggest hitting evil heroes you can have. High strength, ridiculous fight value. They've got good might, decent defense, both of them, especially if you take Azog allied from the Legion in his heavy armor. He's got the White Warg, he's got everything going for both of them. 3+ kill on heroes. Bolg's likely to be wounding heroes on 3s or 4s as well. Overwhelming yes. Can they deal with big heroes? Yes, they can. Can they deal with high defense armies? Now, I've given them a 7 because they're not perfect at this. Bolg, fantastic, will do a lot of damage. If you ally in something like the Keeper from Dol Guldur, he will also do a lot of damage. Azog can wound troops, even though you don't really want him to be doing that. And Yazneg can hit them as well with a +1 to wound, which is great. However, everyone else is strength 4. Now, strength 4 is good, but if you're up against a real high defense army, defense 7, whether it's a shield wall or dwarves or something like that, that is difficult to face, and you're going to be wounding them on 6s. Likely they'll be wounding you on 4s or 5s back. It can be difficult. So you do need to hit hard with the cavalry into the sides, try and isolate the troops. It might sound like I'm repeating myself here, but it is the case. They can deal with high defense, but only if you play it right. So it's not perfect, so that's why I've put it down as a 7. Can they deal with hordes? Next. And I've given them an 8 because you've got 2 attacks. Hordes will generally be low fight value, so they'll either match you or be less than you. In which case, you've got the 2 attacks, you've probably got equal or slightly better fight value, and you've got high strength. So even your normal troops should chew through them. And then on top of that, you've got Bolg, you've got Azog, you've got Yazneg, you've got Fimble, you've got Hunter Orc Captain. All of these can chew through troops. If they're low defense, even Narzug and your Hunter Orcs with bows will probably kill them pretty quick as well. So these are all great ideas to kill hordes. It's like fantastic for killing hordes. Next of all, cavalry. So can it deal with cavalry? Now, depends on the cavalry you're up against. Your cavalry is going to be weaker than most others, especially if they're hitting you with high defense cavalry. You'll be wounding them on 5s, and they might be only wounding you on 4s or 3s, even if they've got lances themselves and they're strength 4. But you can intercept them with your Felwargs, which can stop them and slow them down. You can block them with the big bases. Your heroes can really reliably kill cavalry due to their high strength. And yeah, you've still got your own cavalry to at least be able to nullify their charges. So I'd say they're pretty good at dealing with cavalry, this army, but there is better armies at dealing with cavalry as well. Now move on to monsters. So can they deal with monsters? I've given it a 5 because yes, they can, but only Azog and Bolg can deal with the monsters. and really you want to support them. So if you one-on-one them up against a monster, they've got a good chance, but really you want to be getting extra guys in there to support them. So this is why things like my hero hit squad, I think, is an excellent approach, because you've got this death squad that can run around. If you come across the monsters, you can aggressively attack them and kill them and hit them hard with a lot of wounds and a lot of damage and take them out very, very quickly. But otherwise, the rest of the army is not so good against monsters, and they'll die very easily to them as well. Next, we've got magic. So, not much you can do against magic. As I say, you've just got to be smart with how you use your will. If they've cast it on a high roll, unless you're in real danger, real peril, don't bother wasting it. Use it when you've got a decent chance of succeeding. You've only got a limited will, no resistance, use it wisely. And then lastly now, terror. You've got low courage. Warhorns do help, I would recommend that. And use your big heroes to kill off terror as best you can. Anything especially that causes the Harbinger of Evil rule, try and get that off the board as well, if you can get to it. So put it as a 4. You can reduce its impact with your big heroes that can deal with it, but it's still going to be a bit of a struggle. Terror and magic are the two things you're weakest to. Now, final rating for the army, I've given him a 7.5. Now, I love this army. It's great fun to use. The heroes are fantastic. The special rules are great. The kill counter on Bolg, the ally, if you put the keeper in there as well, it's fun. They look great to the army. You've got thematic moments where you can have father and son riding into battle side by side as a hit squad, just massacring whatever comes in front of them. You can rely on Azog and Bolg to do so much damage for you. You've got Felwargs that give you so much manoeuvrability and flexibility. They are the unsung heroes of this list, in my opinion. Really, really good. And last of all, you've got the good historical alliance combination possibilities. So being able to take Castellan and the Keeper, being able to take the Gundabad Berserker and the Spear supports from there, along with the Master of Battle if you ally in Azog or Bolg. It's fantastic army, great fun to use. Can't recommend them highly enough. They do have some weaknesses, but they also have some incredible strengths. So you've just got to know the strengths, know the weaknesses, know how to mitigate those weaknesses being used against you, and know how to maximise the strengths of the army. Now, I hope you've enjoyed the video, and it's been of some use to you and helped you, and good luck with your own games using this army. If you've got any questions for me, I will make sure I look at all the comments. And yes, if you like the video, please subscribe, put the like in there, and then I know that it's worth the time and effort for me to put together these sort of videos. And if it's popular, I will then look to do this for many other armies. I do have experience with a lot of different armies, and I could hopefully provide some insight for you all. Anyway, thanks for listening. It's been a long one. Sorry for the length of it, but I do like to go into detail. And yes, have a nice rest of your day. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.